Hello and welcome to
Conway's Kitchen is some finger licking. It's an easy way to cook.
What is up, y'all? Welcome to Conway's Kitchen. Today I'm going to be making an Asian-inspired soup. I was going grocery shopping the other day, checking my cabinet, seeing what I needed, what I didn't need, and I came across this box of pho concentrate that it was sort of in the back of my cabinet, and it was cold out, and I thought, pho sounds good, soup sounds good, and so I want to show you today how I took this one component and made a whole dish, around that. If you saw the curry video, a lot of the techniques, a lot of the ingredients, pretty similar. But that's kind of the point. I want to show you how you can take a lot of similar components and a lot of similar ingredients, but with a few tweaks, a few modifications, you can make a dish that tastes entirely different. Let's check it out. Alright, y'all. Everything for the soup here. And we have our mise en place. Everything is in its place, and we want to start how we do every week with some safety. So get a paper towel here, get a little wet. Make sure you scrunch it up so all the wet kind of disperses throughout. Unfold it, lay it down, cutting board on top. Cutting board is secure now. Now we can start chopping. We want to start with our sauté and rice. Those two things are going to take the longest, so we want to start there. I'm going to start by putting the front burner onto about medium heat and adding a good amount of olive oil here. You can use coconut oil as well, but you want to use a good amount. Tofu will absorb and brown very well with a lot of olive oil, so feel free to give it a liberal amount. Here's some tofu that I strained the other day from a package. It's about half that package. One thing I did want to point out is that if you have tofu left over and you have a Tupperware that you're putting it in, make sure you fill the Tupperware with liquid. This is something that I didn't do for a while, but if you submerge the tofu in liquid, it's going to stay fresher a lot longer. So make sure you're doing that. Got our liquid here, just going to drain it out. And again, this is about half a slab of tofu. Unlike the curry video, the tofu is not going to be a super main component. It's pretty complementary to everything else that we have going on. Take a couple paper towels here, wrap it around, and we're going to try and squeeze out as much excess water as we can by sort of gripping it and just kind of compressing it together while still maintaining the square shape of it. You don't want to start breaking it apart too much. So you can just kind of take it in your hands and just kind of get a good grip on it and just kind of like you're trying to compress it, but you're not trying to put too much pressure on any sort of direction. You sort of want to evenly compress it all, and you'll see the liquid start to drain from the bottom. Your paper towel will get all soggy, and it'll just really, you want to do this with the tofu. Try and get as much water out just so it cooks down a little bit easier. It'll brown better. The texture and consistency will probably be a little bit more palatable for you. Not a necessary component, but I like to squeeze the water out. And if you have extra water in your cutting board, you can kind of just mop it up there. Paper towel into the compost. Before we cut the tofu, I want to get that rice going as well, because they're going to take us a pretty similar amount of time here. So we have a little strainer, measuring cup, and some basic white rice here, some jasmine white rice. You can also make this dish with any sort of noodles or anything you want like that, but I like rice in it, so I'm going to cook off some rice, and I always like extra leftovers, so I'm going to cook off an entire cup today, but per serving, probably going to use only about a quarter of the cup, maybe a third of the cup. So per each cup of rice, you'll probably get about 4 servings out of it. Measured it out. We have it in our strainer here. Now we're just going to rinse it off, get some of that residual dirt off of it. Cup of rice there. And like most greens, we're going to use a 2-to-1 ratio. 1 cup of rice, 2 cups of water. So water, rice in here, but there's still all these clumps, so I basically just use this just to break up the clumps before I even turn it on, and that'll just make sure that everything heats up and cooks evenly. Next thing we want to do, since we have the rice going, we want to cut the tofu, cut the broccoli, and the carrots. Basically, order of operations, we're going to add the tofu first, let that brown on one side, we're going to flip it over, and then we're going to add broccoli, carrots, and garlic. Tofu, want to keep in big cubes here, so put it on its side, and I'm going to make 1 cut here to split it in half. And then from here, I'm going to take it long ways and do 1, 2 cuts here, and then go back across it here, and then we have our little cubes. And I'm making this for 2 people today. It's not a ton of tofu. Again, it's sort of more complementary to everything else going on. If you want to beef it up a little bit, you can definitely add more tofu. But I also like to focus pretty heavily on the broccoli and carrots as well.
So broccoli, start breaking these little chunks off, and that way you don't get too much of your stem.
If you have a dog, our dog likes broccoli stems, so you can feel free to use those. Or if you like making your own veggie stock or something like that, you can always keep the broccoli and use veggie stock for that. So a solid handful, we're just going for it. We're just going to use this whole broccoli crown. Solid handful here. It's broken up, so we're just going to rinse them off. It's rinsed. We don't want to cut it up too much because we want to keep the broccoli chunks about this big. So anything that's around that size, you can kind of just put it off to the side and you won't really need to cut it. Something maybe like here, that's probably fine. Maybe you cut these ones in half. It's kind of up to you. I don't really mind big chunks of broccoli, and they are going to be cooked down quite a bit, so they'll get soft. So I'm just going to leave them pretty big chunks here, and then we're just going to take this big chunk here and cut it up a little bit. Broccoli's there. This we're going to save for the pup. Next thing we want to do is some carrots, so we're just going to rinse these carrots off well, and we are going to peel it. And I noticed the oil is popping a little bit on the saute pan, which makes me think it's hot. So I'm basically just going to check that it's hot by getting a little cold water on my hand. Flicking it there. You hear it. Sizzle, crack, pop. It's ready. So basically, we're going to add the tofu in here. And it kind of is all together. And it won't cook down together unless you take a spatula and break it up. You want to be a little careful here because there's sometimes a lot of water in your tofu, and if you're familiar with science, water and oil don't like each other. So sometimes you get the oil and the water kind of jumps up a little bit. So you might want to just sort of heed some caution when you're doing this. Alright, so we got those all separated, and then we're just going to salt and pepper them. A good amount, just to kind of cover everything. We'll be adding a little more salt and pepper with the broccoli as well. Good amount there, just to make sure it's kind of evenly dispersed. And move these around a little bit. And those are going. We're going to leave them like that. Back to the carrots here. We're going to peel them off here. Just good smooth strokes, about halfway from the back all the way up to the front. Flip it around, do the same thing. Just nice smooth strokes. And you can leave the ends on for now. Rice, we see, everything's coming up here. We got the bubbles here. That means it's boiling. So basically we're going to turn it down to about 2 here. We got low, 1, 2. Leave it there. We'll stir it maybe once or twice, but that's going to be it for rice. We're just going to let it cook itself down. Broccoli and carrots here. Basically the last thing we need to chop for this dish, some garlic. We're going to add garlic to the saute and also to the sauce itself. So we're going to use about 3 cloves of garlic. You can do less or more if you're a big garlic person or you're not super into it. But garlic brings out a lot of good flavors in a lot of Asian-inspired dishes. So a little bit can go a long way if you are not super big into garlic. I love garlic though. We're going to go for it. About 3 cloves here. And again, to get that skin off, hold your knife sideways here, and then just do a little compression action, and you'll kind of feel it crack beneath you, and that's when you know that the skin is kind of falling apart. But sometimes they have like multiple little cloves inside, like this one, so basically that initial crack didn't really, that one's fine, but this one still has its skin on, so sometimes you gotta repeat the process a little bit. Alright, so then those are cracked. And now you just want to try and finagle all the skin off of it. Peeled garlic here. You can do, you want to cut them down small, kind of like a rough mince. Probably not as small as you would if you bought minced garlic as itself, but you just want to cut it down really small. Again, you want to be really careful with this because garlic's small. It can be kind of wet and slippery as well. So that's another reason why having a sturdy cutting board is going to be very important. Having a sharp knife is going to be important. And just practicing your knife skills and your cuts and just making sure they're even and predictable motions because you don't want your knife all flying around and stuff and acting all crazy, and it's just going to make everything more dangerous. Alright, so let's sort of cut one way, and then we're just going to kind of go back across here, get this out of the way, making sure everything's safe. And that's good. It's sort of a rough mince, if you will. Some pieces are a little smaller than others. This is still pretty big. The others are small. It's all right. You can leave it as is. Checking in on the saute here, the tofu we got going. If we flip one piece, yeah, quite brown. So basically, we're just going to flip them all. Stir those around. Broccoli and carrots here. Add those. Garlic-wise, we have this whole thing. We want to save about 2/3 for the sauce and about 1/3 for the saute here. So put about 1/3 there. I guess it'll probably come out to just about a clove of garlic, and then you got 2 here for your sauce. Salt and pepper. Just a good amount to get everything around. And there we go. Stir it all around. At this point, you could potentially add a little bit more olive oil. Tofu, again, is going to absorb a lot of that. You saw how brown that tofu got, and that's really as a result of the olive oil. So it kind of soaked up a lot of it. And we don't want the broccoli and carrots to start burning or anything like that. So I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil here, just to kind of cover everything. And what we can do as well, keep all that heat and moisture in, is add a lid. I don't have 2 lids that fit, so we're just going to use a bigger one, but totally fine for the time being. Next thing, we just want to kind of keep an eye on what's happening here, and we want to get this stuff ready for the broth. The broth is going to be the last thing that we end up cooking down, but we can get things prepared to keep it keep everything done in a timely fashion. So we got some spices here. I'm just going to kind of measure them out. I don't normally do this. I kind of eyeball it normally, but I just want to kind of let people know approximately how much of each spice I'm using. Again, making this for 2 people. So we have turmeric, Chinese 5-spice, and ginger. Ginger, classic for a lot of Asian-inspired dishes. Chinese 5-spice, I found it was kind of hard to find this at some stores, but if you can find it, it's a really good, just sort of like generic, kind of gives you the vibe of Chinese food. It's not going to get you there entirely, but it kind of helps bring out some of those aromas, and it'll kind of trick your mind into thinking you're eating good, authentic Chinese food. Ingredient-wise, anise, fennel, cinnamon, cloves, black pepper. So pretty simple. It's got a pretty strong, pungent flavor. I don't use a whole lot of this. I find a little bit goes a really long way. Turmeric here. So we got a tablespoon. I'm going to use an entire tablespoon of turmeric. And I'm using a deli container here just so I have everything measured out beforehand. And I'm able to kind of mix them together, and then I can just dump that into the pan when it's all ready. Ginger here, I'm going to take this little protective lid off, just so it comes out a little bit faster, and we're going to do another tablespoon. So a tablespoon of turmeric, tablespoon of ginger, and then lastly, Chinese 5-spice. Again, for me personally, I think a little bit goes a long way, so I'm going to add a good ½ teaspoon here. And you can actually just dunk these in and pull it out that way, but whole ½ teaspoon, whole rounded ½ teaspoon. It's going to be a good amount there. You can go less or more if you want. But now you got all your spices here, and you can kind of just mix them around if you want. But really, it just makes it easier that when the time comes when the oil is hot, I can just dump everything into the pan, and it'll just cook a lot more even. The other components here, sambal, we're going to end up adding about a little over a teaspoon here. If you like it spicy, add a good hefty teaspoon. If you don't want it spicy but you still want the flavor, maybe kick it down to half a teaspoon here. But we're going to add about a teaspoon of this, but we're going to do that later. Checking in with the saute. See that the other side of the tofu is starting to brown. The carrots and broccoli starting to change color a little bit. All good stuff. This is what we want to see. We're going to leave it just salt and pepper for the time being, and all these other spices are going to go into the pan here, which we can get prepared by putting a little bit of olive oil in here. And let's check in on the rice, because it's looking like it needs a stir. So you see it looks basically like it's done. Just stir it around a little bit. It's looking done, but you want to stir it around and realize most of that moisture is taken out of it. That rice is looking nice and fluffy. That rice looks pretty good, pretty done to me. So it's stirred. Actually, we're just going to trade lids out here just to make it a little more efficient. That's going to keep that heat in there. Going to turn that off, and now we have our proper size lid here. And we're going to let that cook down a little bit more. And what we can do now actually is turn on our back burner for our sauce. So about medium heat here. Basically, we're going to saute the garlic down for just a second here, toast that up a little bit. Then we're going to add the seasoning, the sambal sauce, toast that down a little bit more, and then we're going to hit the veggie broth and our pho broth here. This is what I'm using today. I found it at my local Kroger store. I'd say if you don't have this or anything around that sort of fills a similar niche, you could probably use just like either more vegetable broth or like a bouillon cube or something like that. If you look at the ingredients, vegetable juice, concentrates, onion, mushroom, carrot, celery, garlic, sugar, salt, yeast extract. It's nothing that's super like pho specific. They're pretty basic, generic ingredients. So any sort of like bouillon cube or like veggie broth or something like that. If you don't have anything like this around, you can just substitute that stuff out. Checking back in on saute. It's only been a few moments here, but cooking happens fast sometimes. And basically what I'm noticing is that a lot of that oil is starting to be cooked off, and there's not a whole lot of residual oil left in the pan. So basically, if we were to just kind of keep this here as is, this broccoli might start to brown, these carrots might start to brown because of the lack of oil. I want to try and avoid that. I don't like my sauteed broccoli to be too brown. I think it gives it sort of a soury, tart taste. If you add vegetable broth while you're sauteing some things down, it'll help cook it down more while retaining the structure and adding more just like generic vegetable flavor into it. So I found recently, like I use this a lot of times when I'm sauteing, just a little bit of vegetable broth helps keep sort of the essence of your vegetables while also just making them taste better overall. Thankfully, this is going to ultimately go into a soup, so if you end up adding too much, not a worry, but we do want to sort of add the amount that's going to ultimately be cooked off in the next few moments here. So a little bit, but not a ton, sort of just enough to get it going all around the bottom there, and we're going to leave it like that as is. If you need more later on, you can definitely add. You can see that it starts boiling really quickly, so it's not like it's making your food super cold by adding like a room temperature liquid to it. It's bubbling up. I want to capture all that heat and vapor and stuff like that, so we're going to put that lid on there, and you sort of have this like saute / like fake boil thing happening, but it's really good for vegetables. Back pan should be heating up. Oil's moving around a lot. You can kind of hold your hand over it. You feel some heat. Also, just take a little bit of water here, sizzling. So we want to take our remaining garlic here and just put it in there. And this garlic's cut up really small. This pan is pretty hot, so you want to kind of keep an eye on it. You want to keep moving it. You don't want it to start getting all brown and toasted. You kind of want to keep it yellow and garlicky, and we're just going to sort of like activate it, if you will, or just toast it down very temporarily, and then we're going to hit it with our sauces. So again, just keeping it moving around. You don't want it to brown. It happens quickly. It's only been about 10 seconds. So you really just want to make sure it's not browning up too much, or else you're going to kind of ruin the flavor of your garlic and it's going to taste a little funky. So it's toasted. You can see some of it's starting to brown. It's been about 20-30 seconds. All of our seasonings that we measured out before, boom, hit it. Next thing we want to do, that sambal sauce. Gonna take about a teaspoon here. Boom, hit it. And you want to start stirring that around. Stir it around. What you can also do, you can add a little bit of olive oil. You can also add a tiny bit of veggie broth, just so it doesn't start sticking to the bottom too much, burning too much. You can add a little bit there. Keep stirring it around, probably a little bit more. But similar to the curry video, you're kind of making a little like paste out of it almost. But this is going to act as the bottom, the base here. So really just trying to toast down the seasonings a little bit, kind of activate them, bring out some of those flavors. It's a little pasty. We're actually going to add a little bit more oil. All right, and we'll just leave it alone. Keep stirring it every 10 seconds or so. Similarly, we can go to saute here and just give that a good stir, just to make sure nothing's sticking to the bottom, nothing's starting to brown too much. But you can see that this broccoli is getting really soft, the carrots similarly, but nothing is getting super brown or burnt or anything that's gonna like bring out weird flavors in your veggies. Good structure on them still, but you can notice they're starting to get a little soft here. You can always start trying them as well to kind of see where everything's at. Carrots are soft, broccoli's probably soft. We're pretty close here. Stir that seasoning. You can see you sort of have like a clump now, right? Like it almost moves as its own thing, right? Cool. The pho broth here. So basically these things come in little packets. My general rule is 1 packet per person. So 2 people, 2 packets. Where is this? There we go. It's misleading. I thought that was the open point, but no, that's not. So, the pho package thing like has cooking instructions on it, and the cooking instructions are to just add it to hot water. So it makes me believe that it's not the type of thing that really needs to be like cooked all that much. So that's why we're kind of adding it last. With the pho, want to add veggie broth here. And a good amount of water as well. Basically going to do about 50-50 with the veggie broth and the water. And you're sort of just going to add as much as the broth you want to have, right? This is going to be your broth. We're going to add the saute into it here. And so you want to kind of take that clump and now use the broth and the heat of everything to kind of break that clump up again and get those spices all dispersed throughout. You can also turn the heat up a little bit because there's so much liquid in here that you're really not at risk of burning anything. You're trying to bring things to a boil at this point. And so adding a little bit more heat isn't going to do you any harm. That stuff in the front was pretty done just a second ago, so I'm just going to turn that off and leave that heat going as it is. Keep stirring. Again, these clumps are... The more heat that gets added to it, the more it's just going to fall apart, and soon there will be no clumps. So I'm just going to leave that alone for a second, start cleaning some stuff up. Keep stirring, it's getting hotter, so basically you want those clumps to go away. And as we do that, we're going to just add some more broth and probably about a solid cup of water as well. Because you got the pho concentrate there, you got veggie broth, you got seasoning. It's pretty intense, you know, you can use some water to kind of dilute it a little bit. Got that, no more chunks. We're going to add a good amount of water here. I think that's about the amount of broth we want. Again, I'm just going to kind of be pouring this into 2 different bowls, so I'm going to kind of try and eyeball what seems appropriate. If you want it soupier, you can add more. If you want it less soupy, you know, whatever sounds good to you. Just going to add a little bit more. That sounds good to me. Veggie broth here. This was brand new when I opened it. Used a little bit here, a good amount here. Probably have about half of it left, which is cool, because then I can use it again for more vegetables in the future. But put that lid on and store it for future use. As it's heating up, what you'll kind of see is a little bit of separation between some of the like oil and water and spices and stuff like that. Feel free to kind of just keep stirring it. and just keep it more together. And also it'll help things heat up evenly, because sometimes you'll get bubbles at the top and it seems like it's boiling, and then you stir it around and it's not actually boiling. So we're seeing bubbles, we're seeing that separation. Again, you want to stir it up just to kind of make sure that it's actually boiling and hot throughout. So give it a stir, wait a second. If it's still boiling, bubbles are still coming up, that means it's hot, that means it's good. So basically just going to turn that down to a low heat there and kind of simmer it, cook it low. You can add a lid on top and that'll kind of help keep some of that heat in there. Don't worry about this stuff because we're going to add it to the broth and it'll be hot. Then we're just going to put it with the rice, and we got some soup. What we want to do now, I put some rice in here. This is done. This is still trying to cool down and go back into that simmering spot. But what I would recommend doing here is just trying it, just to kind of see where it's at. Because you can still correct it here, but if you add this and you put it on top of the rice, it's going to be a lot harder to correct it. So give it a little taste, see if it's tasting good. To me, I like it a lot. A little garlicky, a little spicy, a little Chinese vibe spicy. I think it's good. I like it where it's at. So I'm just gonna keep it as is. But you know, sometimes maybe you need a little more salt, maybe a little more pepper, maybe you need to dilute it with more water. Try it. See if it's tasting good. If it's good, you're good to go. If it's not, you might have to start changing some stuff up. Give it a good stir. Let the flavors kiss a little bit. It's at this point, you could leave it for 10 minutes if you wanted to. You could probably eat it right away if you really wanted to. So we're just gonna leave it for just a few moments here. Just let those flavors come together, and then we'll plate it. So I cheated a little bit. I tried some of it. What I really want to point out is that adding the saute in here changed the flavor of the broth itself. I noticed the broth was like pretty heavily seasoned, which I don't mind. But once I added all the broccoli and stuff inside of it, it all seemed to smooth itself out a little bit. So just kind of goes to show flavors are going to change, flavors are going to come together kind of thing. If you made a broth and you think it tastes a little funky, maybe it's fine. You know, maybe you just need to give it a moment. To me, it's done. You're not really trying to bring this back to a boil. We had a little bit of bubbles popping up here, so it kind of lets me know that there's a lot of heat throughout. And basically what we want to do is we want to plate it. We got our quarter cup of rice here, and we got our sweet ass ladle here. And so I'm going to use this. I'm not going to dump it like this because you're going to get a lot of broth and then a lot of chunks afterwards, and it's going to be a little awkward. And if you're looking to split it between two people, it might not be sort of the equal ratio. So take a ladle here, scrape that bottom. You get nice chunks there. And then the second scoop, I usually do way more broth and way less stuff at the bottom. So try and get more broth in there. And you want to cover it. I'm going to add actually a little bit more broth because I want it a little soupy. And then here's that other portion there. We got our initial portion here. Our burners are off. Food is basically ready. Optional condiment here, some soy sauce might help smooth some of your flavors out here. Also, just a good little additive, adds a little kick to it. So I'm just gonna add a touch of soy sauce here. This is like a giant lid, so I gotta be pretty careful, but really small amount. It's really just to kind of just bring some stuff out there. So a little bit of soy sauce, got the rice at the bottom. Want to make sure we stir it all up. We added the turmeric in there, so that's kind of why everything's all yellow. But that's kind of why I love turmeric. You always know it's there. Yeah, a nice little soup here. And again, you can make it more soupy or less soupy. If you don't really want it to be soupy, you could use a lot less broth and you'd still get a lot of the same flavor out of it, right? So, yeah, just kind of try some of it, see how it came out. I think it's really nice. Totally vegan, too. Yeah, vegetables are soft. Rice is soft, but still has a little bit of structure to it.
If I don't gonna drip on me.
Third time making this. You gotta rank it. Best, worst?
It's definitely the best. I do like it with noodles though.
There we go. +1 for noodles. I like the rice more, so. Shows the easy variations you can make. You can change it up. You can change up the veggies. You don't have to use tofu, you know? Was it mushroom and green onions what we used last night? That was good.
I can't do that bit that you do, but also use the wrong arm. It's this one.
So you gotta hit at the same time, right?
I can't.
The
Timing's always off.
Yeah. That's why you're such a good dancer.
I'm not a good dancer. I don't know how to dance. Alright. You did it. That's it.